I'm Courtney Boyce.
I'm Derek Olthius, and you're listening to Drop Jaw Podcast.
Boom!
With flies, especially right during ice off, you could probably go find one of your kids' dinosaur toys and throw a hook on it and throw it out there.
I'm Simon Gawesworth, and you're listening to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast.
I wish I could sit down and have a conversation with the trout and go, "So, Mr. Trout, why do you like those worms so much?"
Stick 'em solid.
Welcome to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast, your source for fly fishing talk, tips, and stories. In this episode, we talk RIO Fly Line with Simon Gawesworth. Simon is a world-renowned spey caster, author of several fishing books and articles, and brand manager for RIO Products. Simply put, this guy knows a thing or two about fly fishing. Due to some technical difficulties, we weren't able to link Jason into this podcast, so I'm flying without my wingman. If you enjoy this episode, let us know. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and our YouTube channel. I am Chad Nelson, and here is today's podcast. So Idaho Falls is just the manufacturing facility.
It's where RIO was born, and really where the majority of RIO is. It's the manufacturing facility, it's the warehousing. All the people who started working at RIO over the years are there. But the head office, RIO is owned by a company called Farbank that owns Sage and Reddington. So their head office is on Bainbridge Island. And so all the executives and the directors and such are on Bainbridge Island. So my boss is on Bainbridge Island, so I go out there to report to him and the rest of the marketing team. So the marketing and brand manager for Reddington and Sage and we all stay in close touch. So we just go up for monthly meetings. So I would say the head office is there. The distribution is there as well. All the products we make at RIO are warehoused in Bainbridge Island, so that all the RIO lines can be shipped with Sage orders, Reddington orders, to kind of keep shipping costs down. So that's why it's based there. But I would say strictly RIO is still based in Idaho Falls.
Okay.
Just not the warehousing or the executives.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's jump back into it, Simon.
Yeah.
For those tuning in, I've got special guest Simon Gawesworth, brand manager from RIO Products, world-renowned spey caster, author of several books and fishing articles. Simon and I got halfway through this podcast, and I realized I had neglected to hit the record button. So Simon was good enough to postpone a meeting he has shortly. Also experiencing technical difficulties, wasn't able to get Jason on at the same time with Simon, so I don't have my wingman. I'm flying solo, but appreciate Simon taking time out of his day to visit with us and share his knowledge on fly line, particularly line when it comes to throwing streamers for guys that like to throw big flies. So again, welcome, Simon.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Yeah, we've had a good visit this morning, and none of it was recorded. So earlier, Simon had given me a brief introduction of how he came to the U.S., and he used to guide in Argentina. Was that correct?
That's right, down at the bottom end, Tierra del Fuego, for those big sea-run browns.
Wow. I bet that was just beautiful country.
It's very, very pretty. It's a very unique tundra-type landscape. Very, very few trees. In fact, there is one solo tree on the 30 miles of river you'd guide. So that was it. There's a single tree there. So that it gives you an idea of scrubland and grasses and hills and kind of fairly desolate country, but stunning sunsets. I mean, it's a stunningly different part of the world, and with unique animals, of course, that you don't see in England or in Idaho or in Washington.
Oh, I imagine. You know, I'd mentioned to you I'm from Canada. I imagine it's much like northern Canada. I mean, we're just at the far two ends of North America, or the American continent here. Right,
yeah. I don't know that northern Canada area, but I can only imagine it's a similar sort of a tundra landscape with this crazy river full of massive sea trout. It's brilliant.
Oh man. So the big end of browns down there, how big do you find them?
The average when I was guiding, so I left guiding there in '98. The average fish size was about 11 to 12 pounds. Yeah, I think it went up a little bit when when I started guiding, if I recall rightly, it was about 11, and then certainly it was about 12 pound the average of the last season I guided there. So pretty decent size.
Wow. If that's the average, I mean, guys will fish a lifetime to catch a fish that big.
Yeah, they do, and that's what makes this a unique fishery. That there are so many large brown trout down there that you'd be really unlucky if you didn't get a 15-pound fish. I mean, pretty well everybody caught 15-pound plus fish. We would call them box fish because in the fishing log you draw a little square around everything 15-pound, and you'll draw a diamond around anything that was a 20-pound, and you draw a triangle around 25-pound fish. And so the lingo would always be, did you get a box fish, a triangle fish, a diamond fish? So yeah, I saw fish up to, I think the biggest that was there that was caught when I was there, not that I guided the chap, but one of the other guys had a 28-pound. That's a pretty large brown.
My word. Yeah. I can't imagine.
No, they've had bigger, of course, since then. There's a few world records come off that river. So it's a legendary river. Very rarely do you get anything single digits. If you get a 6-pound fish, that's a real grunt of a fish.
And again, what was the name of that river system?
Rio Grande.
Okay. Is that what RIO Products is named after, that river, or where did the name?
Good question, but no, it's not. It's actually after the Rio Colorado in Costa Rica. Jim Vincent, the guy who set up Rio, was, in his words, a fly fishing bum, and he and his wife Kitty they ran a couple of years, or for a number of years, they ran this camp in Costa Rica on the Rio Colorado, and then when he left that, he fished and shot and hunted around the US, just writing articles, outdoor writer. And then he decided to set up a company and just named it Rio after the Rio Colorado. And just because a nice simple name that's easy to remember, has connotations of the sport, of what the product's about.
Oh, okay. I was wondering that.
Now you know.
Yes, and speaking of Rio, Jason and I love your fly line. We've been wanting to do a podcast on fishing line for some time, and who better than yourself to have on the podcast? So again, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
We, for the big flies that we fish and that we produce, our favorite line is the outbound short.
Okay.
So I wanted to get into line a little bit. Maybe we can talk about that line first. What makes that so good for throwing large flies? And then what other fly lines might you recommend for guys that like to fish streamers?
Well, that's it is a very good choice. It's certainly the best streamer line we make for big streamers, and that's the crux of it. Is if you're talking about big streamers, or if you're talking about just regular trout streamers. And fly line design is a very simple thing if you understand some just raw physics. It's all physics, castings physics, and then boiling right down to presentation and line turnover. So when you make a fly line, you have shapes in a fly line. Fly lines have tapers, and they have level bits of the body, and they have tapers. And so the outbound short is a particularly good line for streamers, for heavy streamers, because when you look at the cross-sectional profile of it, the head, the fat part of the way forward, you will see that most of the weight is at the front end. And you'll also see that the line has a very short front taper and back taper. And both of those are conducive to moving mass. There's a very simple thing, mass moves mass. So if you have a line that's got more weight at the front and you have a very short front taper, I mean, every fly line's got a thin tip at the front end. Mm-hmm. So a fly line has to taper down to this thin tip. But the shorter that taper is, the more mass there is at the front. And if you can put more weight towards the front end, it'll cast a streamer very, very well, comparative to a fly line that's got mass at the back. Mm-hmm. So the outbound short does that because of the weight distribution. Plus, we actually bump up the weight of a fly line, the weight of that head. So if you buy a 6-weight outbound short, then it weighs what an 8-weight does. It's quite a lot heavier than the regular 6-weight at the front. And so that extra mass in the fly line really helps to turn over a fly.
How short is that taper on the outbound short, the front end?
Front end is probably 5 feet, 4 to 5 feet. I mean, if they all our lines vary according to size. Some fly lines have a taper as short as 3 feet. Some fly lines will have a short front taper of about 5 feet. So generally, in the world of line design, 3 to 5 feet is considered a short front taper. We very rarely have anything less than that because you'll get a lash. Your line will lash over so violently it'll never present. It'll never shoot. 5 to 8 feet is a mid-length front taper, and anything above 8 foot is a long front taper.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I love about that fly line, too, where we fish often, our favorite reservoir here, the afternoons get windy. And that line is great for punching through the wind as well.
Yes, that's again, that will be another benefit of that mass at the front and the extra weight and the short front taper. All of those are very conducive to punching out into a wind. They're great for casting a big fly. They're good for if you wanted to attach a sink tip or something like that. That mass at the front helps cast those things. So that's exactly that. You've hit the line profile dead right when you say that. And it comes in numerous densities, so it's a pretty cool series of lines for depth. You can get fast sinking, slow sinking, hover, intermediate, floating. So you can get a series of lines in that control the different depths that you fish at and still throw big streamers as far as possible. And that was the other kind of the secondary design idea in that line. One was to cast big flies, and two is to cast as far as possible. It's funny how lines vary when you really don't understand or know about line designs and their differences. But if you had a 6-weight of that line and a 6-weight Rio Gold, for example, just our best-selling trout line, and you just took an average caster, average Joe caster, the design of that outbound short will give the average caster probably 20 feet further distance. Just very simple things. You sacrifice things, so it's not the perfect line. When you design a line for ultimate distance, it's got the thinnest running line of any line for the given diameter of anything we have, so there's less drag, there's less weight in that, which is why it goes further. It is those lines heavier, so it loads the rod deeper and punches further than regular lines. And so really the outbound short is our best line for maximum distance with big flies.
So you mentioned you sacrifice things. What would you sacrifice then with the Rio outbound short?
A couple of things. With all that weight at the front, you're never going to get the delicate presentation. So if you wanted to fish a size 18 parachute Adams, it's going to turn over too violently and fast. That thin running line means you can't mend it, so it's not such a good river line, for example, because if you make a cast, the running line is so thin you can't throw a mend into the head there. It's also quite heavy on the line, so it's good on a medium fast action rod, but it's not going to be good on a bamboo or a glass fiber rod, something that's slower. So there are sacrifices, and sadly there isn't one fly line that does everything perfectly. The advancements of fly line technology have made it really possible to design lines so accurately these days with so many changeable areas of a fly line design that we can make a line do anything we like, but unfortunately you can't make one line that's going to do everything.
Is it possible to make a line that doesn't wrap around twigs and rocks on the shoreline when we're fishing?
All right, that would be a brilliant one, like a floating running line that kind of stays in the air.
Yeah, for guys that don't use a stripping basket.
Exactly. I'll get the R&D team onto that.
Okay, I'd appreciate it. What other lines then, Simon, would you recommend for streamer fishermen?
Well, streamer fishermen, again, if they're looking at these bigger streamers, the type of stuff you're talking about with the weight and the sizes, then the other really good line is called a streamer tip. And the streamer tip, as the name would suggest, has a sink tip at the front end. There are not floating versions of this one. It's a specifically designed line for fishing streamers from a drift boat when you're drifting down a river and you want to throw your line and your fly as close to the bank as you possibly can. Let's say you're drifting 30 feet away from the bank, and when you're streamer fishing to the bank with big streamers, especially in the fall, the big browns, rainbows, the target species lie close to the bank in ambush, and they'll move 3 or 4 feet away from the bank to grab the streamer, and then they'll return to their safe haunt of the bank where there's less current speed and yet they have this good ambush point. So in that situation, when you're bank fishing or fishing to a bank from a drifting boat, the most effective area where you're going to get most fish is pitch the fly as close to the bank as you possibly can, and then you strip back 15 feet. That's about it. Once you're 10 feet maybe. Once you get closer than that, 10, 15 feet to the boat, you're in the deeper, faster current. The fish aren't going to follow it. The fish aren't going to be targeting there, lying there. So it's really a less effective area to concentrate on. And so in that style of fishing, you want to hit the bank as close as possible, make 3 strips, 4 strips at most, and then recast. So the problem with the outbound short in those situations are that the sinking outbounds have 30-foot long sinking heads. And so when you pitch it to the bank, then your line sinks down, and if you do only 3 or 4 strips back, you're not going to be able to pick it up and make another cast. It's just too much sunken line down to make an effective cast. And so the streamer tip are lines that have a very short head of only 10 foot long, 10-foot sinking tip. And that allows you to go boom, 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 3 quick strips, pick it up, recast the bank, and then concentrate your fishing in the effective fishing zone.
Okay, very good.
It's a similar shape to the outbound short. If you look at the profile of it, you'll go, oh, that looks like an outbound short, and it really does. And it is basically it is the outbound short profile, but it's specifically targeted to a different family, so that anglers who get aware about this, they target this streamer tip. That's, as I said, it's great for off a boat to the bank, when you're drifting.
You'd mentioned that the Rio Gold is your best-selling trout line.
Yeah.
Would you recommend that for streamer fishing as well?
I would for the smaller streamers, absolutely. Anything that's, say, up to a size 6 or 4 streamer that hasn't got a lot of weight on it, then that will cast it perfectly, and you'll get good presentation and stability in there. It'll be a good line on rivers because you can mend it. It's only a floating line, so that's something you've got to bear in mind. A lot of people don't fish floating lines for streamers, and they need the sinking line or the sinking tip, or at least an intermediate section. So if you want a floating line with a smaller, lighter streamers, then probably the Rio Gold is the best option.
Okay. Simon, what is it that differentiates Rio from other fly line manufacturers?
Oh, that's a good question. There's not many line manufacturers out there. The majority of fly lines are made by 3 companies: Cortland, Scientific Anglers, and Rio. So you get lines like Teeny Lines and Wolf Lines and Hardy and Orvis, and all these lines that you can buy are only going to be made by one of these 3 manufacturers. There's also a small company in Canada, Northern Sports, that make a few fly lines. There's Airflow in Wales that makes some fly lines. There's a couple of Chinese companies that make some very, very cheap fly lines. So of the 4 companies, I'd say Monarch is a small company in Colorado that also makes fly lines, but I wouldn't call them a major company. The 4 major fly line companies are Airflow, Cortland, Rio, and Scientific Anglers. They're all produce great lines. Airflow and Monarch are a completely different technology of fly line to the PVC fly lines that Rio, Cortland, Scientific Anglers make. So if you draw a line in there, most of the lines are going to be made by the Scientific Anglers, the Rios, and the Cortlands of the world. And we all make good lines. We've all got good machinery, good technology, good understanding of fly line design. And I think, to answer your question, where my real prejudice lies maybe is that we have everybody, because we're located in Idaho Falls, everybody from the loop welder, the line guy behind the machine that's tweaking the tapers and stuff like that, all the designers and brand managers, the sales managers are all nuts on fly fishing. And all we do is, that's our biggest passion. So we accumulate staff, people at Rio who fly fish, and that, I think that really lends comes through into the product design. And we're always casting, we're always fishing it. We tweak it as we see things that are not quite right. We come up with new ideas all the time because we're on the water. And I think we have that big benefit over the other brands, which are more corporate brands that don't really seem to have the internal fly fishing passion that Rio has. And so I really put our hat on that. I think that we have a great understanding of fly lines as a result of that. And we produce some really, really good tapers. We also have some very good technologies. Nobody else has this low stretch connect core, which I'm a massive fan of in terms of fly line performance. And so I think we just have some really good technologies that other companies don't have, and they equally have different technologies to us that, if you spoke to them, would say, "Oh, these are great technologies that we have that no other company have."
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that and your XS technology. Can you briefly explain what those technologies are?
Yeah, excess is extreme slickness. That's a hydrophobic coating that makes a line repel water, and it keeps the line really, really slick on there. It migrates silicons and stuff through the pores of a line so it stays slick for shootability. Just makes a line. Funnily enough, if you took a fly line that was non-hydrophobic, that it was really a dry fly line, you get a lot of friction in the guide, so they don't shoot very well. And so one of the things we try and do with fly line coatings is repel water and let the natural silicons and lubricants come through and create less drag through the rod guides. So we have two kind of technology coatings. The excess you talk about is the slickness that comes through, excess meaning extreme slickness, and we have max cast, which is the hydrophobicity. It repels water to allow this coating to be the slickness that shoots. So those are technologies that are unique to RIO that we've played around with, and as I said, those are distinct benefits. And then Connect Core is just a low stretch core that it reduces the stretch of a fly line from about 30% to about 6%, and
quite a bit.
It's a huge reduction. I mean, the simplest way to picture that is to imagine a full fly line, which is 100 foot long, and a regular one. You could hold the end of that, tie one end to the tree, and you could walk 30 feet back, and it'll snap about after that 30 feet. So the stretch point of a fly line is always measured at breakage point, because as it's measured on a machine, it keeps stretching till it breaks. So the stretch point of a normal fly line will be 30 feet. And when you're on a 100-foot line, it's unbelievable how much you can pull a line. Whereas a low stretch line, you can only pull it at 6 feet, and then it'll break.
And the benefits of that is setting the hook, or?
Yes, I mean that you're asking a very biased person, because I've been onto our R&D team for many years, asking them to develop a core we could do. First of all, we went to no stretch, and that didn't work at all. No stretch is bad. We couldn't. When you've got no stretch, if you have any set or coil in the line, there's nothing to pull it out. So we didn't want no stretch, we wanted a low stretch. So I'd been on to the R&D team for a long time trying to develop this. So I'm very biased on this, because this is one of my pet things in fly lines. I love everything about it. I love the sensitivity. If you've got a sinking line, when all you're doing is relying on a feel to know there's a fish there, then the lower the stretch, the more sensitive it is. The faster you can set a hook, you move your rod tip and you move the fly straight away. You don't have any stretch in there, so your hook sets are quicker. But for me, it's actually I think those are side benefits. For me, as a caster, as somebody who loves casting and loves to feel casting, the benefit of a low stretch line in casting is just the performance of the line. And when you take out the elasticity of a fly line, your rod loads up so much better as a result. You have much more control of the fly and the cast. You have more feel of it, and I just think as a casting performance in a fly line, that these low stretch lines are far superior to anything with I call it bungee, but it's not really bungee, but just stretchy stuff. That you're, as I say, almost asking the wrong person, because I just like this low stretch in every way. Fighting a fish, I've been testing these cores down in Belize and Florida Keys fighting tarpon, and there's no doubt that when you can pull 5 pounds with your hand, you pull 5 pounds on the fish. You don't pull 5 pounds and lose 4 pounds of it through the stretch of the thing. Massive benefits.
Do all RIO lines now have that core technology, or is it just a line of fly lines there?
No, we are migrating almost all lines, all performance lines into that. So we have 3 trout lines that are best-selling trout lines: is the RIO Gold, the RIO Grand, and the Trout LT. And both of those lines are available in both options. All 3 of those lines are available in a low stretch core and a regular stretchy core if you want. So you can choose on that. But pretty well everything else we make is migrating to this low stretch core. This year, all our outbound shorts, the lines you mentioned, have gone to a low stretch core. All our streamer tips have gone to the low stretch core this year. So they've migrated to that And they took a bit longer than we've been making fly lines on this low stretch core for about 4 years now. And they started with our full sinking lake series. And the main reason was that the core is a braid, and braids are much more supple than nylon, stiff nylon cores. So with lines that aren't designed to cast big flies, you can get away with a nice relaxed braid and have a good performance line. But when you start to develop a line that's going to cast bigger flies and need higher line speed, you need something a little bit stiffer in the core so that energy is kept in the line. And it took the R&D team a couple of years to formulate this connect core we're talking about in a stiff enough version that would retain energy. And so it's taken us that number of years to be able to bring it out into the big lines like the streamer tip lines, the outbound short lines, our cold saltwater line series, like our striper series that have the same performance requirements. Again, those are in that low stretch core series this year because it's a stiffer version of the regular low stretch.
Interesting. Simon, I wanted to ask you about line care. Are there any tips that you would recommend for fly fishermen in regards to taking care of their fly line and perhaps extending the life of the fly line?
Yeah, definitely. I guess the first thing to know is that kind of the average life of a fly line is going to be about 400 hours. And so, to some people that could be 5, could be 10 years of fishing, sadly, if they don't get out more than a couple of days a year. It could last 10 years, but if you're a high performance user, if you're a guide spending 200 days on the water, you can go through 3 fly lines a year. I mean, it's like tires. They're going to wear out. Yeah. So the first thing is to have an understanding of how a fly line with no treatment is going to last. It should last about 400 hours. That's our kind of standard. And then if you clean it and if you perform certain maintenance things, you can extend that line by 50%. You can get 600 hours out of it. So that's something to be very aware of, is that the maintenance will improve the life of a line. And subtle things like, I mentioned earlier, the fly line had pores where the silicons migrate. Well, the pores clog up with dirt. There's dirt in the water. There's suspended dirt in water. The line gets there. The line will touch the grass behind you. People cast on grass fields and things like that. And the dirt gets in these pores. And the very first thing that will do is make your line tip sink, because your line doesn't have the buoyancy to hold up a line tip that's got this extra weight in it, the extra dense materials. So line tips start sinking quickly when you don't clean them. They start to crack because the dirt that's in the pores kind of wobbles around in the cores as fly lines stretch, and fly lines will crack as a result of that. So cleaning a fly line is really a very important step in prolonging the performance and life of a fly line. And there's different steps to it. I mean, the simplest step is, especially if you're standing on the bank of a lake, or you're in the bottom of a boat and you're stripping your line in and you're depositing that strip line in the bottom of the boat or on the bank of the lake, that's going to pick up a lot of dust and dirt. So at the end of those days, our advice is very simple. Is you get back home and you strip your line off your reel and you strip the line into a bowl of kind of lukewarm water with a very mild hand soap, not a dish soap, but a very mild hand soap, a couple of drops of that in there. And you just put it through a soft cloth and you just kind of wipe off the dirt. And if you do that after the end of every trip, you'll absolutely prolong the life of that line.
Yeah, great tip, and so important. I mean, fly lines, that's a key part of your equipment, but, they're also not inexpensive for a good fly line. So anything you can do to prolong that and keep it performing at a high level, so important.
It is, and I mean, that's the first step. And the other part to know is that a fly line, I don't want to get into chemistry here and confuse people, but PVC fly lines, I alluded to earlier, which are made by Scientific Anglers, Cortland RIO. That type of fly line has PVC is a plastic that can dry out. And what keeps the plastic supple is a thing called a phthalate. And phthalates are attacked by UV, they're attacked by sunscreen, by bug dope, by aerosols. There's lots of things that attack fly lines and basically dry them out. And the easiest way is to think of skin, if you like, on your hand, is if your skin dries out, it cracks. So what you do to stop your skin drying out is you apply a moisturizer. And really, that's a great tip on fly line. There's fly line cleaning fluids out there. We make one. Scientific Anglers make them. Cortland make them. There's Russ Peak have them. There's Loon Outdoors. There's other materials out there, but there's line cleaning things. And one of the important things is that certainly with the RIO Agent X line cleaning, there are moisturizers in there that keeps the phthalates happy and prolongs the life of your fly line. So another step, it would be once every 8 or 10 trips, doesn't have to be daily, but once every 8 or 10 trips, you just apply these dressings, these line dressings to your fly line, and that again prolongs the life of them.
Great info. And I did see that on your website. You guys sell that moisturizer.
We do, yeah, and there's a little video on there. If anybody's ever interested, you can go to the RIO Products website, click on the video link page, and there's just a little video there that just basically goes through the 3 steps of how to clean a fly line and how regular to do it. It's got some tips on there. Don't do this, for example, on sinking lines or intermediate lines. So some of the line cleaning chemicals are made of silicon, or have silicon in, and silicon will make a line float. So if you apply our Agent X line dressing to an intermediate line, it'll start floating. That's probably not what you want. So things like that are good little tips that you can get by watching that video.
Great. One last question, Simon, before we let you run. Sure. Any new products or technologies coming out that you can talk about?
Kind of really just touched on it there. Was just come out for this new year is these outbound shorts and these streamer tips in this Connect Core. Right now, we're developing our 2017 products that obviously still a good year away before the trout season. So we're honing down the selection there, and we're kind of working on that. We don't really have any new technologies we're working on. Well, we are working on plenty, but we don't have anything new coming out. So really for 2016, it's the development of these Connect Core in these regular outbound and streamer tip series. There's a couple of new lines come out that are not so useful for the streamer angler. There's a single-handed spey casting line, which is just beautiful little roll casting and spey line, but it's not got weight at the front, so it's less of a interest to those people fishing big streamers, heavy-weighted streamers and things like that. It's probably our nicest casting weight forward line we've ever made. I think it's the most beautiful casting weight forward line, overhead or spey. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at it from a streamer point of view, it's just not going to do that for you with a big streamer because the weight's at the back, not the front.
Gotcha. And when is that due or expected to come out?
That we actually release all our new products September the 1st each year. So that was released to the industry for like September last year. And just about now, as trout season's coming in, the shops are getting the stocks in. So that one should be available. If it's not available, like the outbound short with the Connect Core, that should be appearing on shop shelves from March, April, May onwards this year for the rest of the year.
Okay. Well, great. Simon, really appreciate your time. Appreciate the information you shared with us and our listeners. And
no problem.
Hopefully
very
we can
happy
have
to
you
have
back
that.
on the podcast sometime in the future.
Oh, let me know. I'm sitting here always ready to chat about stuff. I love teaching and education, so that's part of my meaning of life, if you like, is I love passing on in the information I have. So I'm very, very happy to do it in any way possible.
Well, again, thank you. There's no one better to talk fly line and casting.
I'm sure there are, but pick me anytime you need me.
Sounds good. Thanks, Simon.
All right. Thanks, Chad.
All right, friends. Thanks for listening to the Drop Jaw Flies podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or our website, www.dropjawflies.com. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, or our YouTube channel. Now get out there and hook a big one and stick 'em solid.